Hey Broncos fans, Sam Brown here with the Broncos Breakdown. We're going to get into our video here in just a minute, but before we do, answer the pinned comment down below this video, the very first comment right underneath in the comment section. Grade the Broncos free agency moves for me, A, B, C, D, or F. We're going to be breaking down every single move the Broncos made, top to bottom, here on today's show. But I want to know what you guys think right off the start. I want to see at least 50 people, hopefully 100 and even more, replying to the pinned comment. Grade the Broncos free agency moves. And without further ado, let's jump on in. Like I said, I'm your host, Sam Brown, and we've got Broncos free agency grades on today's show. We're going to be breaking down both their internal and their external signings, top to bottom. It's been a busy offseason overall for the Denver Broncos. So let's start first by talking about the players that left the Denver Broncos, or likely will wind up playing with a different team next season. Phillip Lindsay already signed with the Houston Texans, and then the Broncos cut Jarrell Casey and A.J. Boye, saved them over $25 million of cap space. Those two players remained unsigned yet. Lindsay, we already know, is playing the 2021 season with the Houston Texans, so just keep that in mind as we go into today's grades. We'll start with the big one. Justin Simmons, a 4-year, $61 million deal with $35 million in guaranteed money. I've said it before, this is an A grade from me. This was their top priority going into the offseason. You've got a really kind of a centerpiece of a defense at 27 years old. He's the highest safety paid in the NFL. But trust me, he's worth every damn penny that he'll be making. Look at the stats over his last 2 seasons. Over 140 tackles, 24 pass breakups, which is kind of nuts when you think about a free safety like Justin Simmons, who does a little bit of everything in coverage, plays well against the run, can also pressure the quarterback some. This was a huge signing for the Broncos. Priority number 1, like I said, for Justin Simmons to come back to Denver. And now he's the highest paid safety in the NFL as we take a look at the highest paid million per year. Justin Simmons slotting right in above Budda Baker from the Cardinals at $15.25 million per year. Eddie Jackson, Kevin Byard, Tyrann Mathieu round out the top 5, but nonetheless, step 1 of the offseason was to bring Justin Simmons back, do whatever it takes to make it happen, and I think it's their best move of free agency because they were able to bring Simmons back to Denver. But what do you say? What was the Broncos' best move of free agency? Maybe it's coming up. I know there are a couple choices later on in today's video to choose from, but get down in the comments section. Maybe it was Justin Simmons, but let me know what the Broncos' best move of free agency was. We'll go to Shelby Harris next, the defensive end. The Broncos re-signed on a 3-year, $27 million deal with $15 million guaranteed, a decent amount, and Harris certainly deserved it. I'm going to go ahead and give this grade a B+. I thought it was a solid signing. Harris has become a more well-rounded player in his time at Denver. $27 million is a little bit much, perhaps, but the value that he brings as a mentor to a guy like Draymond Jones and pass rushers like Malik Reed is really crucial moving forward into the next couple seasons with the Broncos. But like I said, he had a great 2020 season. Whenever he was injured, it's tough, obviously, but whenever he was on the field, 8th ranked defensive end out of 125, according to PFF. That run defense grade 17th, and the pass rush grade 8th, 83.5. It's pretty damn good if you're Shelby Harris, and now he slots into this depth chart alongside Mike Purcell and Draymond Jones, who I'm really excited to see in his 3rd season. Denver could still potentially look to upgrade the nose tackle position. Mike Purcell had opted out of the 2020 season, so really not sure what we're going to get from him next season, but nonetheless, Shelby Harris, a veteran and a leader that the Denver Broncos brought back. Another leader that Denver brought back for 2021, Von Miller exercised his $22.5 million option. As of now, I'm going to give this one a B. And I think it's worth emphasizing that this could change. Honestly, this grade could go up because Denver still has the opportunity to restructure that contract with Von Miller. And I think really the original plan was to make sure he stays in Denver and then go from there. $22.25 million is a big hit for a guy like Von Miller who's on the wrong side of 30. Didn't play in 2020 with that torn ankle tendon, but I think that even if you get 2019 Von Miller, because of what he brings off the field and how important he is to this defense, you could learn to live with the money. I mean, 8 sacks is still nothing to scoff at. 11 tackles for loss. dealt with a little bit of injuries back in 2019 as well. Nothing crazy like this year, but nonetheless, it's hard to envision this Broncos defense without Von Miller, this Broncos depth chart without Von Miller, especially, like I said, if he can still play, he's so important to the city of Denver and to this Broncos team. Bradley Chubb, Von Miller returning for 2021, along with Malik Reed, who I think will have a nice third year as a kind of a designated pass rusher role. We'll talk about A.J. Johnson in a little bit. Josie Jewell slots in a middle linebacker. But nonetheless, Von Miller back. Denver accepted his $22.25 million option for 2021. A B grade for me, pretty solid. Hopefully up to a B plus if maybe we can bring that cap hit down, spread his salary over 2, maybe 3 years. I think that would make a lot of sense for George Paton and the Broncos. All right, another question for you guys to answer in the comments section. Should the Broncos add a linebacker? Simple Y for yes or N for no here. But I want to know what you guys think, because I think the outside linebacker top 3 of Miller, Chubb, Reed is pretty much set. I know inside linebacker still remains a little bit of a need. I would type my Y for yes right now, but let me know what you think. Y for yes or N for no. And then Kareem Jackson, we talked about quickly, so I'll touch on it not for too long, but it's an A grade for me. I talked about it on our show yesterday. A 1-year deal worth up to $5 million, half of what the Broncos would have paid him if they had accepted his team option for 2021. A great signing for Denver, a guy that I wasn't sure they were going to bring back, but now the top 5 safety duo in the NFL of Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson remains intact. Honestly, might be pushing top 3, maybe even the best duo. You know, I don't have any names off the top of my head, but it's clear the impact that those two have on the defense. Kareem Jackson, a solid year in 2020, 90 tackles, 4 pass breakups, and an interception. Played a lot more in the run game, I would say, as Bryce Callahan saw a little bit more time outside, at outside corner because of their deficiencies out there. But Kareem Jackson, a big piece of the Broncos defense over the last 2 years. He'll be back for 2021. And as soon as the news broke yesterday that he was coming back, dropped everything I was doing, said we're hopping in front of the camera, let's get a video out for Broncos country. That's exactly what we did for you. You see this thumbnail right here. It's actually on the channel right now. So if you want to go down youtube.com/Broncos TV, you can check out that video and see all of the other videos that we have going on. And while we're at it, go ahead and subscribe. You know, I was doing some analytics the other day, and I saw that over 75% of the people who watch our videos aren't actually subscribed, and that hurts me. You know, that hurts me. I'm probably going to cry myself to sleep tonight if we're being real, but we can turn that around. Still plenty of time to turn that frown upside down, hit that big red button, and subscribe today. All right, we talked about those internal free agency signings. Now let's dive out to who George Paton got in free agency. We'll start with the running back position, and I'm not going to lie, this is the move that probably my least favorite move of free agency, if we're being honest. Mike Boone signs on a 2-year deal with up to $4.5 million. A former UDFA who spent the first 3 years with the Vikings last season was behind Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. He was RB3 on that depth chart. And so now he's going to look to push Royce Freeman for RB2 roles. But, you know, it's a C for me just because you downgraded at the position, plain and simple. Philip Lindsay walks, yeah, and I'm okay with that. But you've got to get someone in there as well to bolster that group. I'm not sure that Royce Freeman or Mike Boone is really going to be the guy to take some of that workload off of Melvin Gordon's shoulders. And to be frank, I don't completely trust Melvin Gordon as a 3-down bell cow back. I think that letting Lindsay go and Mike Boone coming in, it might be a signal that the Broncos will look to the NFL draft for a running back. But Mike Boone, 2 years, $4.5 million, joins the Broncos backfield, 59 yards and a touchdown last season. Nothing to lose your mind about. We'll see what happens. Maybe he provides some important depth, and maybe he could surprise us. But right now, I'm putting it at a C. So what is the Broncos' biggest need heading into the NFL draft? I think if you had asked me a couple of weeks ago, it would have been cornerback hands down. That might be their strongest position right now heading into the NFL draft. You can say running back, offensive line. Maybe you still think it's cornerback, linebacker. Get your votes in the comments section now. All right, moving on to the corners, the real juice of free agency for George Paton. Starting with Ronald Darby, the first signing, obviously. 3 years, $30 million with $19.5 million guaranteed. I thought it was a solid signing, giving it a B as of now. As former second rounder, had a strong 2020. Yes, durability is a slight concern. Yes, I don't love $30 million, but as you'll see here with his contract numbers, it's really something that the Broncos can get out of over time. And let me explain. You see that 2021 cap hit $4.0 million. That's pretty much a, hey, prove us the last year wasn't a fluke. If he proves that it wasn't a fluke, 2022, $13.0 million. Now, 2023 is the kicker because he'd still get $13 million if he's on the roster. However, the Broncos can move on from him and save $10 million of that 13. Essentially, if Ronald Darby isn't the Darby that we saw in 2020 with 55 tackles, 16 pass breakups, you can move on fairly easily after 2 years, sort of similar to an A.J. Boye situation. Obviously, he's younger and more talented, probably a little bit better upside, but nonetheless, Ronald Darby coming to Denver, I think was a solid signing. I put it at a B for now because if you look at the contract, there's still room to move on from him in case things don't pan out. So, solid signing here, Ronald Darby to the Denver Broncos. And then the big one, just a couple days later, George Paton made these two signings within, I think, 3 days. And the cornerback depth chart, which we'll show in a little bit, went from very bleak to one of their strongest position groups. Kyle Fuller, plain and simple, this is an A. This is an A signing, no doubt about it. 1 year's, English is hard. 1 year, $9.5 million, a reported $9 million guaranteed. And Kyle Fuller comes to Denver and plays for Vic Fangio, who was his DC back with the Chicago Bears. He's a former All-Pro. I mean, if you're getting a former All-Pro at $9.5 million, that's pretty good value for Denver. And you've seen the numbers over the last 4 seasons. He's proved he's a starting caliber corner. I don't think there's any question about it. Think about it like this. Kyle Fuller is he's got more accolades. He's a better cornerback over the course of his career than Ronald Darby. Yet on an average year-per-year basis, he'll be making less than Ronald Darby. Yes, it's 1 year versus Darby's 3, but you see what I'm saying. I mean, this is really good value for a guy with double-digit pass breakups every year except for that one in 2020. A little bit of a down year for him, but nonetheless, love the value. And now this DB depth chart, I said on yesterday's video about the Kareem Jackson signing, this is a top 10 secondary in football. I don't think there's any doubt about it anymore. Keeping Simmons and Jackson was huge, but the signings of Fuller and Darby really just round out that depth chart. Callahan gets to play a little bit more in the nickel, which he's really better suited for anyways. That's what Denver signed him to become. And so this Kyle Fuller signing and really Ronald Darby, two of my favorite signings of free agency, obviously, and really brought the Broncos defense to a whole nother level. That's a top 10 defense now if they can stay healthy. What's your level of confidence in the Broncos secondary going into the 2021 season? Scale it for me from 1 all the way to 10, 1 being yikes, scared as hell, 10 being best secondary in the league, not even worried. They're going to allow 100 passing yards a game. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I was probably at a 5, a 4 maybe, because Justin Simmons wasn't sure to return. Callahan was the only starter on that DB depth chart under contract. I'm at an 8 or a 9 now, easily. I'm very confident about the Broncos secondary heading into 2021, but get your votes in down below. All right, quickly here to kind of wrap things up, talking about the Broncos tendered exclusive rights free agents. These guys will all be back for 2021. Calvin Anderson, Trey Marshall, and Deontay Spencer. Deontay Spencer, obviously the starting kick returner, could potentially look to bring someone in there to challenge him, but nonetheless, 1-year deals, veteran minimums, no big deal about it. Now, we are still waiting on the outcome and the future of Tim Patrick and A.J. Johnson, starting with Tim Patrick here. Both of them restricted free agents, second-round tenders. Tim Patrick, a breakout year, I think would fit really well as that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And A.J. Johnson, a guy who would start at middle linebacker if the Broncos bring him back. I mean, led the Broncos in tackles last season, was a huge part of that defense. But you could always potentially improve the inside of that linebacker group. But nonetheless, if you bring A.J. Johnson back alongside Josie Jewell, you've at least got 2 guys that you can roll out there and have at least some sort of faith in. So we'll see what happens. They have until April 23rd, at least other teams do, to sign these players to an offer sheet. Then the Denver Broncos would get a chance to match it. So grade the Broncos free agency moves in the comments section. I asked you at the start of the show. I'll ask you now. Pinned comment, first comment right below this video, A, B, C, D, or F. I want to hear your grades. I'll give you my grade right now. It's an A- overall. I think George Paton had a really strong first offseason as the Broncos GM. He was aggressive when addressing their biggest need at cornerback, brought back the key starters on defense, Von Miller, Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons. We've talked about him time and time again, Shelby Harris as well. the questions still remain under center. The Broncos really didn't, obviously they didn't do anything to kind of get any sleight of hand or anything. I think we're going to start to see over the weeks to come leading up to the NFL draft what their plan is at quarterback, and you're going to want to be sure to stay tuned through all of it. We're going to have nonstop coverage leading up to the big night, so hit that big red button and subscribe today.